something went wrong, what would happen? So if someone were to sue you for your marketing claim, how would you defend it? Or if the test result didn't come out fine, what would we do? And that changes the dialogue, and we can't really rely on the argument of, well, my competitors do it, or my manufacturer might have the test results. It doesn't, like if you were in front of a lawyer, you're getting deposed, that's not the right answer.
Your responsibility to have all your documentation in your hand.
Yes.
Welcome to another episode of Nourify and Beautify, the podcast that shows you the other side of beauty. Every week, we interview experts in the world of beauty, health, and wellness so that you can make decisions that are right for you. My name is Linda Yates.
And I'm Nora Bushama. I want you to think about the last time you picked up a new supplement or wellness product from the store. For many people, there are some unknowns with any product. How it was tested, what regulation it had to meet, or if anyone ensured it was safe and effective. This week, we're talking with Brian Yam, a compliance consultant who works behind the scenes to ensure health and wellness products meet the standards they need to. He's going to help us understand that what compliance really means and how we can make it better, and how can we make better, safer choices.
If this is your first time listening to Nourify and Beautify, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. If this isn't your first time, we hope you'll follow or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. And share the show with someone who can benefit from all of this amazing knowledge. Now, let's get on with the interview.
Brian, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
I'm very glad we're going to talk about this topic today. I think when a lot of people look at the products or the shelf, they don't think about the steps it took for the product to get there. Behind every product is a process: testing, quality control, regulation, all with the goal of protecting consumers. And with so many health and wellness products flooding the market these days, it's more important than ever to know what's going on behind the scenes. As compliant consultants, you're one of the people who help ensure these products meet the standard they need to be safe and trustworthy.
I think you're right, Nora. Most people don't understand how many boxes a product has to check before it ever even makes it to the shelf. So, David, let's start with the basics. What does compliance actually mean? And when it comes to supplements and wellness products, and why is it such a critical part of the industry?
Yeah, no, it's a great first question. Well, compliance is essentially in the supplement space, or I guess with other functional foods and wellness products. It's about us making sure that we follow the requirements set by FDA, FTC. We want to make sure these products are high quality, safe, and effective for the consumers. And also and make sure that it's not marketed in a very misleading way. It's really important that we're capturing that. And on top of it too, it's also important to see it, from a brand owner level. So obviously you want to do things the right way. You want to make sure you're consumer centric, but also just for the company itself to have success for the long term. I think that's really important. It's one thing to have sales short term, but it's another thing to make sure that success continues over the long term span, that it's sustainable. And I think part of that means having a good quality culture, compliance program, as well as, if you're thinking about an exit strategy, you want someone to acquire your business, you want investors. They're looking at your compliance program now. It's not like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where they only look at your top line sales and then your market value and pay you for that. Now they're looking to make sure that after they acquire you, they don't get hit with a whole bunch of lawsuits pertaining to compliance issues and gaps. So yeah, it's all over. It's across the entire operation. It's absolutely important for the brand, but of course, for the safety and making sure the consumers are getting what they expect.
What's a day in a compliance consultant looks like? What's the challenges and you're faced with every day?
There's no dull day. I will say that much. My goodness. So, If we break down kind of the buckets, if you will, of what we do here, but high level, we've got the remote QA department role. So we're working as the remote QA department for a lot of these smaller brands or startup brands, even established, fairly well-known established brands that are in the Costco's of the world, the Walmarts of the world. So we'll be acting as their remote QA department. Then there are this other bucket, which is the startups. The entrepreneurs are looking to do this properly and launch and do this right and launch and make sure they get that launch correct. Then you've got this other bucket, which is they're just looking for advisor role. They just want someone to use it as a sounding board. Is the manufacturing telling me the truth? Is our quality compliance doing the right things? Are we missing anything from a strategic standpoint? And so with that, my goodness, you're dealing with recalls. You're dealing with FDA import alerts. You're dealing with customer complaints. If someone goes to the hospital, if they find a bug in your product, like what do they do? Sometimes they don't really know how to handle that and navigate that type of situation. You're dealing with testing. So for example, Amazon, we hear about their Amazon, the latest testing requirements. There's failures now, so they don't know how to handle that. Another situation where you've probably seen these publications, either journal publications or maybe more of a PR or news publication or news article where they say these researchers or industry group tested a slew of supplements in XYZ category, and they didn't find this ingredient, or they found high levels of heavy metals. So now we have to figure out, is this true? What's going on? Does that impact some of these clients? So you're navigating this weird space of any fire at any moment, and then dealing with the day-to-day stuff. So the regular QC releases, making sure SOPs are properly executed or established, all the, dare I say it, mundane side of the quality compliance world, but making sure that that's obviously executed for the brand. So never a dull day. It's pretty insane, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that definitely sounds a very exciting day and very full. So how did you get interested in this line of work? And was there a specific moment or experience that led you to focus on compliance and product safety?
Well, there wasn't like an aha moment at all. I can't say I lived that experience, but it was more of it was the natural progression out of university. So I did a co-op or like an internship in my college, like during my undergrad. I worked in a lab, I worked on the field, and I was doing more of the typical academic science, like career path, if you will. And I realized the lab thing isn't for me. I realized that working out in the field, out in the forests, and examining all these samples and doing DNA analysis wasn't my jam. Learned a lot, but I realized like I wanted to tackle the corporate world. So I talked to my advisor at the time, and there was this opening. And by the way, I'm located up in Canada. Canada has a very different set of regulatory requirements for dietary supplements, or what they call natural health products here. It was just rolled out. This around 2004. One of the largest supplement manufacturers had to implement these changes, so they hired me on to help them with that, and I stayed on after I graduated, and kind of climbed the corporate ladder there in regulatory affairs. And moved into validation. So we validated the systems, the processes, the ERP system, et cetera. But then kind of just climbed that ladder and went into compliance, moved over into the brand level, working with these brands, supplement brands, plant protein powder brands, et cetera, built out their supply chain, worked with multiple contract manufacturers, built out qualified all our raw materials. So really kind of honed in on that skill set. And now bringing that now to the startups, taking all that knowledge and
You've
experience
touched on
and
everything.
and the goal is to hopefully prevent these issues from happening at the very beginning with these small startups. I think there's a lot of issues we see in the paper about these recalls and testing issues and the stigma behind supplements. I think a lot of that could have been prevented if they just built some basic low-hanging fruit compliance aspects into their operation. They just brought that operation into this
100%.
startup. It would have avoided a lot of these things. So that's kind of where the consulting thing was born, and the YouTube channel, et cetera. And here I am.
Oh, nice. I want to go back because I'm more in the testing world. I'm in the lab. So I haven't touched really the other side you're talking about. So I'm very curious to know how do you handle when you have an out specification, when you have, because we do the testing. If there is any problem, we just throw it to the client. It's the client's responsibility to handle that. So what happens after?
Yeah, I get it, right? Well, it depends on the nature of the out of spec. So some could be a real serious issue, a food safety issue. Others could just be a quality issue. Assuming it's a food safety issue where it could really impact the safety of consumer, we will take proactive measures. We'll assume that there is an issue that could lead to a recall or a real food safety harm. So we'll hold that. We may have to execute withdrawals, pause on sales. So there's that element of it. Now, the majority of times, these out of specs aren't at that high level of an issue. And in that, it comes back to the investigations. We'll have to work with the contract manufacturer on that investigation, making sure they've got all the data that they need. Obviously, working with the labs. Sometimes it's a retest or testing additionally to understand the nature of this out of specification. And then from there, we hopefully identify a root cause. And from that root cause, you can at least create a short-term game plan and hopefully a long-term game plan. And I say hopefully because sometimes, depending on the nature of these out of specs, you sometimes don't have a root cause. Mm-hmm. So you're working with what you got. But yeah, it's a really strong collaboration between the lab in some cases, as well as the contract manufacturer and the brand. There's a PR element, there's a communication element. And sometimes contract manufacturers, they're really busy. They're working with hundreds of other clients, also a high priority, high volume clients, and you got to get a piece of their attention. And so you have to help them, guide them. That's kind of where we come in to help some of these startup brands. And then obviously work with the lab. Sometimes it's a lab method issue, a human error. There's a whole bunch of things that we can look at. But yeah, we're looking at all the different angles, root cause, and then hopefully prevent that from ever happening again. It's a lot of it comes down to the supply chain. You're only as good as your manufacturer, you're only as good as the ingredients you procure. And that supply chain is so complex. So there's a weak link anywhere and it can happen anytime. But yeah, that's kind of where we start.
So what are some of the biggest conceptions that you feel people have about product testing and regulations for health and wellness products?
Oh my God, I could speak on this for a long time. I guess the first one is that there is still this stigma or misconception that supplements aren't regulated. FDA does have regulations. I mean, they're very well thought out. They're quite thorough. Now, whether they're enforced properly is a separate discussion. I see some shaking heads here, and I agree with that sentiment. However, technically speaking, they are regulated. And I do see publications or news articles where they say supplements aren't regulated. So that's one issue. And there are good brands that are following the regulations. So that's why it's important to understand that. And when it comes to testing, I understand from a consumer level how important testing is. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I emphasize this with my clients that testing is only one part of that equation, right? So I kind of I use this as an example, testing is a checkpoint and a point of time. And if I use martial arts as an example, let's just say I had to do a black belt test. I'm going to test for my black belt in karate. The test is I have to break this border with my hand. Now, I could wing it, smash it, and break it, but that doesn't make me a black belt. And the same goes for testing. You can test, you can pass, it could be complete fluke. And so testing isn't everything. You got to do all these upfront, upstream procedures, compliance programs. You got to do all this upfront work. You got to put it in the training. You got to put in the time. You got to put in the effort. And so a lot of people, we do fall in love, understandably, to test results, but that's not all of it. And I think it's important for people to understand that there is this manufacturing aspect and the GMP compliance of it all and all that fun stuff when it comes to supplements. It's not just testing, but I get it. I understand why people glom onto it. It's easier to understand to a certain degree. But, to me, that's just, I don't know, that's just
As
the
you
big
said,
one.
testing is one piece of it. You test
Yeah.
that one bottle that we received to the lab. You don't test the whole batch. You don't know how homogeneous the products are, how the mixer is working, how,
Yes.
There is a lot going on.
You're speaking my language, Nor. Like exactly, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't really understand that. Um, and so, it is what it is, but that's why we're there to educate and to help support them. I'll throw one more thing here, and this is more for the brand owners, the entrepreneurs out there. And there's like the default mindset that I see. Maybe in your world it's different, but the entrepreneurs that we run across or come across with, they typically go in with the mindset, and it's understandable, of things will be fine. Like, I'll just use this contract manufacturer today, it'll be fine. Or I'll just test this one time, it'll be fine. And while that's true, it might be fine. I try to flip that question and kind of approach it from the point of view of, well, if something went wrong, what would happen? So if someone were to sue you for your marketing claim, how would you defend it? Or if the test result didn't come out fine, what would we do? And that changes the dialogue, and we can't really rely on the argument of, well, my competitors do it, or my manufacturer might have the test results. It doesn't, like, if you were in front of a lawyer you're getting deposed, that's not the right
It's
answer.
your responsibility to have all your documentation in your hand.
Yes,
It's your product. It's your responsibility eventually.
that's right. And even things like finding a contract manufacturer, a lot of the times we're looking at certifications. We want to make sure that the relationship with the sales rep is strong, which are all important. One thing, when we are vetting manufacturers, auditing them, we look at the design of the facility, even things as simple as the floor and what material they use. Because you're right, they're testing, they're doing all these great things, they're wearing the masks and all, and the equipment, they've got it all clean and shiny. But I go in from the point of view of, if there was a contamination, there was a salmonella hit in the facility, how do you get it out? If the floor isn't easily cleanable, how do you get that out? So it's a very different shift in the point of view. And so I think that's another misconception, or at least a different way of looking at things, at least from the brand owner or entrepreneur level.
With so many new health products and wellness in the market, how can consumers be sure that products they're buying are safe and meet compliance standards? Is there any red flags or things people can really or should look out for?
Yeah. My gosh. So I'm coming in from a very different point of view, because, and maybe Nora and Linda, you've probably seen kind of like how the sausage is made, essentially. Like, you see things behind the scenes. And I think there are the typical answer would be, read the label, look for certified products, NSF certified product, USP certified products, ask for the test results. I think those are all good starting points. But at the same time, like, if even the simple advice of looking at test results, well, not all brands share their test results. Not all brands have these certifications. Like 90% or even more of them don't have NSF or USP certification. So how does the consumer choose? And so, for me, I look at a couple things. First is, how long has a brand been around? I think that's an important aspect of it, because with time comes a lot of mistakes that they've learned from. And over time, they usually build in compliance into the program. I also look at brands that may have a larger parent company. And I know some people may be screaming like blasphemy, how dare you, Brian, in the supplement space, look at the larger.
I agree with you 100%
right?
there.
But they have the resources, they have the manpower to implement quality controls that maybe a startup doesn't have. But there are still good startup brands, don't get me wrong. So how do you decipher those from the others? I think on a more simpler tactic, just looking at the labels, I think if the claims are almost overtly overpromising, or kind of tangent to a disease claim, they talk about anti-inflammation, pain, regenerating cartilage, testosterone boosting, immune boost, you know what I mean? Like, where it's almost a bit too much, that's a flag for me. I like a brand with more conservative language. There's a reason why it's more conservative. I think that's really important. So I think that starts there. If you were to look at the website, I see some startup brands or smaller brands that might feel or look big, like on Amazon or their fancy website. They forget the supplement facts. I see that a lot. That's a good rule that I have. At least have the supplement facts on there. Sometimes they don't even list that. And then from a regulatory standpoint, I look at that label closely, but not for the ingredients that we typically think about. Like if it's the right ingredients or the right dose. That's important. I look at it more of, is the format right? Did they miss any big things? Did they mix up the ingredients that have daily values with that don't have daily values? Does it match FDA templates? That's what I'm looking for. I think that's really important here, because when the label is sloppy, what else is sloppy? That's the flag. Now,
That's a great point.
we'll see what the consumers take away from that. It's
Yeah.
not easy, but it's something.
Yeah. So, with regard to consumers, are there certain labels or certifications that consumers can trust more than others when they're evaluating supplements or other health products?
Yeah, so I alluded to this earlier. I think if you can find supplements that have that USP certification, NSF certification, even things like Clean Label Project is helpful, because essentially there's some level of assurance that a third party is testing the product. Now, each certification has their nuances, and ultimately it's still a starting point. Like, I don't put all my money into that certification, but it is helpful. It's a strong indicator. But like I said, not a lot of products have that certification, which kind of makes it harder. And of course, if you're able to reach out to the actual brand and talk to them, see what they're able to share with you. Some do share their test results. Some will even share a little bit about their manufacturer, whether they're GMP certified, what kind of certification they have. So that's also very telling. Again, if they have NSF certification, USP certification at the manufacturing level, that is all very, very helpful. But I mean, just to be very blunt, there's a lot of brands out there that aren't great, but they lie. They lie on the label outright, and it's really hard for us to trust supplements. And so I think it really comes down to having that good relationship with the with the brand, talking to them, understanding things behind the scenes, how transparent they are overall. Even just hearing how they speak, how the owners speak on LinkedIn is important. But yeah, for me, there's other factors too: time and market. Who really owns them, and of course how they speak to the quality program and talk to that. But it's hard. Everyone says their quality is a priority. Everyone does the testing. It's
But
tough.
yes. What are the biggest challenges you face in ensuring products are compliant, especially with trends and fads emerging so quickly in the wellness industry?
I think the biggest one that I've been seeing is substantiating claims. So FTC, and FDA, of course, they require all your claims to be truthful and not misleading. And what that means is, typically they expect you to have human clinical studies to back up your claims, or really, really well-established scientific evidence. But typically they're looking at human clinical trials, double-blinded, et cetera. And I think in this day and age, podcasts, the Andrew Hubermans of the world, like all these experts out there and influencers, for them to make content, they're looking at things that are more beyond what's in the human studies right now. They're looking at things that are done in animal studies, in vitro studies, test tube studies, things that are done in fruit flies, because they're looking at the future, right? They're looking at the potential possibilities, and they're drawing from those studies. And the reality is that FDA or FTC doesn't let you rely on studies done on animals or test tubes. They are expecting that gold standard of clinical trials. So that's the biggest challenge right now. I know a lot of brands, they listen to the podcast, then they're thinking, all right, I need that ingredient in my supplement. How do I make it? And they want to say the same things, but there is that hurdle that they have to get through. And it's a tough one, because now who's going to do the studies? Who's going to fund those studies and putting those trials together? It's not cheap, especially for the various startups out there. So that's one of the biggest challenge.
So for anyone who's interested in entering this line of work, what advice would you give that person considering a career in compliance for health and wellness products?
Yeah, so ideally, if you are able to get a gig with a consulting firm that's open to teaching you. Not all consulting firms are willing to do that. Sometimes they just want to hire someone that can just move right away. But if you're but if you're able to find a small boutique firm that's willing to mentor you, teach you, and train you, I think that's incredibly invaluable, because a lot of this compliance and the fires and putting those fires out really comes out of experience. There's really no real school that will teach you this or degree that will really teach you these things, because it's all learn on the job, if you will. And I think there's this need for this next generation of compliance officers. It's not the sexiest gig in the world. And so I think it's important to pass this knowledge down to that future generation. And I think that's one way of doing that, finding these boutique consulting firms, working in and growing with them. And another way of doing this is kind of going from this education pathway. There are these regulatory certifications you could obtain. And there's other like auditing certifications you could explore as well. And I think that would be a great way to put some value into that resume, to having that auditing certification, the GFSI certifications, the supplement GMP certifications, and kind of position yourself as an auditor at first, then go out into the field and learn from these things. And then you can take all that learning and then kind of move into the compliance world, either with the brand, manufacturer. There's so many ways you can move. You can work with these larger corporations, these global CPG brands or companies. They have huge compliance departments, all focusing on different aspects of the operation. So there's so many avenues that you can go. And I'll add one last thing for those that are humming and hawing here, is that because it's not as sexy, there's a lot of room for growth and acknowledgement and recognition here. Because once the boss realizes you can do this job well, it's hard to find people like you. Mm-hmm. And once they found you, they want to keep you. And so I'll throw that carrot out there. Yeah. And I think in my career, that's kind of how it worked out, because like I said, in that particular time, the regulations for Canada were very new, but it helped brand me as the regulatory person. Okay, talk to Brian. He's the regulatory guy. And that kind of set the stage for how you can climb that ladder, build new pathways, et cetera, and build new programs and all these things. So I think there's an element there. And I think it's nice because you don't have the same competition as marketing. Everyone wants to go into marketing or sales, right? You don't have that competition. So there's that too.
That's good.
If any of our listeners out there want to know more, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I guess there's two main ways. I've got a YouTube channel. It's called Mighty Startup. You can find me, just type in Mighty Startup, you'll find me. That's geared more for the entrepreneurs, those that are new to supplement and want to start a supplement brand. That's content geared just for them. And they can work with us directly there. For other brands that are already established, they're thinking about building out their compliance program, aren't sure of how they stack up against FDA requirements, really want to get that checklist, or I guess a checkup of their systems, and just say, hey, how do we measure up against FDA requirements? We help them with that too. They can reach out to us. blueoceanregulatory.com is our website. My email is brian@blueoceanregulatory.com. They can reach out to me directly and we can go from there.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in. It was very informative and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was great speaking with Brian. The biggest thing I took from the interview when he mentioned the label, because I agree with him 100%. You look how much effort and how meticulous they did the label. It will show you how meticulous they were with the whole product. And he mentioned if they were sloppy with the label, what other thing they were sloppy with. So that was my biggest take out from our interview with Brian. I think it's very important. I've never thought about looking at the label, honestly, before that.
I was going to say the label too. So then I need to think of a different takeaway, Noor. And I guess one of the things that resonated with me is when he talked about on their website, are they even showing some ingredients or things that they're promising? Does it just sound too good to be true? And so doing that research, Google is our friend in some ways, in the fact that it does give us more information so that we can dig deeper. And I think that was really helpful. I also appreciated the fact of the certifications and having an understanding of what they might even be and what they are out there. So we want to thank each one of you for listening to Nourify and Beautify, where we show you the other side of beauty. If you want more information about us or to read our blog, check out nourify-beautify.com. I'm Linda Yates.
And I'm Nora Bishama. See you next time. The mission of Nourify and Beautify is to help you understand whether beauty, health, and wellness products are effective and safe, so that you can make decisions that are right for you. When you follow, rate, and share the show, you help us do that, and we really appreciate it.
If you haven't been over to our YouTube channel, you can watch our interviews there, and we'd love it if you would leave us a comment to let us know how you feel about the show. If you want to learn more about the show, read our blog, and don't forget to check out our website, nourify-beautify.com. This podcast is produced by TSC Studios, and our music is from Soundstripe.